Let's be honest with each other right now. There are rumors, and then there are projections that feel like prophecy. What we're about to break down today sits firmly in the second category, because when a credible analyst from Bleacher Report points a finger at a specific team, a specific player, and a specific deadline, you don't look away. You lean in. And right now, every Blue Jays fan with a pulse needs to be leaning all the way in because the name JoJo Romero is about to be the most important name in Toronto baseball before the summer heat even arrives. If you've been following the St. Louis Cardinals this offseason, you already know the story. This isn't a team tweaking around the edges anymore. This is a full-blown teardown dressed up in polite corporate language. They're calling it a strategic transition. The rest of baseball is calling it exactly what it is, a rebuild. And when teams rebuild, assets get moved, veterans get shipped out, and the phone lines to contending franchises start lighting up like a switchboard on Black Friday. The Cardinals have already sent Sonny Gray packing. Wilson Contreras is gone. Nolan Arenado is gone. Brendan Donovan is gone. These weren't bench warmers or roster filler. These were all-stars, veterans, the kind of names that make a locker room breathe easier in the final days of September. And now they're all elsewhere. What's left is youth, energy, potential, and one very dangerous, very tradable 28-year-old left-handed reliever who posted a 2.07 ERA over 61 innings last season and is walking straight into the final year of his contract. That man is JoJo Romero, and right now, he might just be the most valuable piece on the entire Cardinals roster when it comes to what contenders will pay to get him out of Missouri and into their bullpen. Bleacher Report's Kerry Miller didn't mince words. His projection was direct, cold, and honestly a little spine-tingling if you're a Blue Jays fan who's still haunted by last October. He wrote that any Cardinals player with fewer than 3 years of contract control is unofficially on the market. And Romero? Romero is essentially waving goodbye to St. Louis, whether they trade him or not. He's in his final year before free agency. This is the last time the Cardinals can extract significant trade value from him. And you better believe a front office in full rebuild mode is not going to let that asset walk out the door for nothing. Miller's projected destination for Romero? Toronto, the Blue Jays, and the moment those two syllables hit the internet, the entire Toronto baseball world held its collective breath, because this isn't just a wouldn't it be nice fantasy. This is a market logic projection backed by organizational need, roster construction reality, and the simple, brutal arithmetic of what happened in October. Let's go back there for a second, because we have to. The Blue Jays bullpen last postseason didn't just underperform, it collapsed at the worst possible moment. When the margin for error shrinks to zero and every single pitch carries the weight of an entire fanbase's hope, the bullpen cracked. It wasn't a one bad game anomaly, it was a systemic failure at the highest stakes. And that kind of failure doesn't disappear in the offseason. It doesn't get erased by motivational speeches in spring training. It lives in the memory of every fan who watched it happen, and it creates a psychological weight that every reliever who steps on that mound in 2025 will carry on their shoulders, whether they admit it or not. Now take a step back and look at the current Blue Jays bullpen construction. There's a genuine left-handed depth problem. And Kerry Miller dropped another bombshell that most people glossed over in the noise. He mentioned that Toronto may be looking to not just reinforce their ninth-inning options, but potentially replace or complement Jeff Hoffman as the primary closer. Replace him? That's a conversation nobody wanted to have out loud, but somebody just had it, publicly, in a major national outlet. So here's the situation crystallized. Toronto has a World Series window that is very much open, but absolutely not guaranteed to stay that way. The core is talented. The lineup can damage anybody on any given night. But the back end of the bullpen has a vulnerability, and everyone who covers this team knows it. You can win 95 games and still get knocked out in the first round if the ninth inning is an adventure rather than a certainty. Bullpen is psychology as much as it is performance. And right now, Toronto needs to inject some cold-blooded, high-leverage confidence into that bullpen before September arrives. Enter JoJo Romero, Left-handed, 28 years old, not a young arm with upside and promises, an actual, proven, high-leverage weapon with a full season of production to back it up. A 2.07 ERA over 61 innings is not a small sample size magic trick. That is a sustained elite performance across real major league situations. That is a closer's profile wearing a setup man's number. That is exactly the kind of arm that changes how an entire bullpen breathes in the late innings of a playoff series. But here's where it gets complicated, and this is the part the excitement merchants don't want to slow down and explain, because the price isn't going to be comfortable. The Cardinals are not in a desperate situation. They're not a team scrambling to unload a struggling veteran before his value evaporates. They are a team in full control of their timeline, sitting on a premium asset, and they know exactly what they have. They've already watched the market establish a reference point. In 2024, the Miami Marlins moved Tanner Scott, also a lefty reliever, also elite, and they got 4 prospects back. 4. And nobody in baseball called it an overpay because the market for elite left-handed late-inning arms is insane and everyone knows it. So if the Marlins got 4 for Tanner Scott, what do the Cardinals get for JoJo Romero? Romero might not command exactly the same package depending on where his performance sits come July, but he is not coming cheap either. Left-handed, sub-250 ERA, prime age at 28, final contract year, and increasingly likely to be the primary save option in St. Louis as the season builds. Every save he racks up, every dominant appearance on a Wednesday night in April is another inch added to his price tag by deadline day. And here's the thing that keeps front office executives up at night in every contending city. The Cardinals don't need to rush this. They have a young, inexperienced roster. They can absorb the uncertainty of a long summer without the pressure of a playoff race breathing down their necks. They can let Romero be their anchor. Let him pile up saves, let him build a narrative, and then sit back in late July while 5 or 6 desperate contending teams trip over each other trying to get to the front of the line. That's not a bad position to be in. That's actually an almost perfect position to be in. Toronto would be in that line, probably near the front of it. But standing in line doesn't mean winning the auction, and this is where the Blue Jays front office earns its money, or doesn't. Because there are 2 completely different schools of thought on how to handle this situation, and both of them have legitimate arguments. The first school says you move early, you engage the Cardinals before the market heats up, before a tough stretch in June exposes every contender's bullpen weakness simultaneously and sends prospect prices through the roof. You negotiate from a position of relative calm rather than deadline desperation. The risk? You commit premium prospect capital to a reliever before you know if he'll sustain his performance all the way to August. Relievers are volatile. One bad mechanical adjustment, one forearm twinge, one rough patch, and the arm you overpaid for in May becomes a question mark in August. The second school says you wait. You see if your current bullpen holds. You let other contenders bid up the market, potentially pricing themselves out. You watch Romero's numbers through June and July and only pull the trigger when the need is undeniable. The risk? By then, you're in a full-blown bidding war. The Cardinals have leverage they didn't have in April. The asking price is no longer one elite prospect. It's 2 impact names and a maybe. And if you hesitate too long, another team jumps the line and you spend the rest of August wondering what if. Neither path is risk-free. That's just the reality of the trade deadline, and it's especially true for a reliever of this caliber in this market. What separates bold front offices from comfortable ones is the willingness to make a decisive call under that kind of pressure. Toronto has been in a win-now posture for several years. They have drafted, developed, and accumulated prospect depth. The question is whether they're willing to spend some of that depth to lock down the thing that cost them in October. Because let's paint the picture. It is mid-July. The Blue Jays are in a tight battle for the division lead. A 3-game series against a division rival comes down to the final night. The bullpen has shown cracks over the previous 2 weeks. Sports radio is doing the thing sports radio always does, pulling tape, citing trends, asking the uncomfortable questions about left-handed depth and October memories. The front office phone is ringing. The reporters are asking questions. And the choice that seemed theoretical in February is suddenly very, very real. That is not a hypothetical. That is a Tuesday in July in every competitive baseball market. And the teams that have already solved the problem before Tuesday arrives are the ones who sleep a little better when it gets there. There's also something worth acknowledging that doesn't show up in any statistical projection, and that's the clubhouse dimension of a move like this. When you add a proven cold-blooded closer quality arm to a bullpen that has been carrying psychological weight from a postseason collapse, it doesn't just change the numbers, it changes the atmosphere. It changes the way other relievers breathe in the seventh inning, knowing what's coming behind them. It redistributes pressure across the entire pen and creates layers of protection that didn't exist before. That is a domino effect, and its value is genuinely hard to quantify, but absolutely real. Meanwhile, back in St. Louis, Romero himself becomes an interesting figure in this narrative. Not just a commodity, but a human being who is probably very aware that this is his audition for his first major free agency. Every save he records in a Cardinals uniform in 2025 is an argument he's making to every team in baseball about what he deserves on the open market. He has every incentive to be exceptional, and an exceptional Romero is exactly what makes him irresistible to Toronto and simultaneously more expensive for them to acquire. The Cardinals have already sent the signal. The rebuild is real. The asset is available. The only question is how high the price climbs before a deal gets done. And if there's a team that has both the organizational talent to meet that price and the organizational urgency to feel it acutely, it's the Toronto Blue Jays. This is not a story about a maybe. This is not July noise in March. This is a market projection built on organizational logic, roster need, and a very specific kind of collective pain that Blue Jays fans know too well. The ninth inning has been the story too many times. The arm that could end that story is wearing a Cardinals uniform right now and pitching toward the most important deadline of his career. So the question that's sitting on the table is simple, but the answer costs something. If the price is a top 100 prospect, someone with real upside, real organizational value, the kind of name that makes scouts wince when they hear it in a trade package, do you pay it? Or do you trust what you have, tell yourself the bullpen will figure it out, and bet your competitive window on the same formula that cracked in October? Because courage and recklessness really do look identical until the final out tells you which one it was. The phone is going to ring in St. Louis. It might already be ringing. And when it does, there's a very real chance the area code on the other end starts with 416. Whether Toronto picks up aggressively or lets it go to voicemail is the decision that could define this franchise's next October. And October, for a city that has been waiting a very long time, is everything. If you think the Blue Jays need to go all in and pay whatever St. Louis asks for JoJo Romero, drop a comment right now and tell me why. And if you think the price could be dangerously excessive for one reliever in one contract year, make that argument too, because this conversation is worth having. Don't forget to hit that like button. If this breakdown gave you something to think about, subscribe if you're not already on board, because this channel goes deep on the stories that actually matter, and share this with every Blue Jays fan you know who still feels last October in their chest. We'll see you in the next one.